Perhaps there is nothing more cynical in British television than Doctor Who's periodic descent into chaos, followed by an attempt to salvage it with nostalgia, budget cuts, and, when truly desperate, David Tennant. And here we are again with whispers in the ether suggesting that Tennant, once again the golden boy of Who, might be drafted in to steer the ship away from the rocks of doom and back into primetime TV. But before we get into that, allow me a moment of self-indulgence, because one's doctor is an intensely personal thing. It's often a matter of age, of when you first encountered the strange, brilliant figure in the police box. For me, it was John Pertwee. He was an authoritative, suave, clad in a cape figure in the police box, and maybe the impression of John Pertwee has been passed on to me. Maybe I feel a bit John Pertwee-ish, but that Time Lord with a velvet touch and a serious regard for earthly bureaucracy. But my first real memory, the transition from Patrick Troughton to John Pertwee on black and white television, watching it in the corner of the farm kitchen, and an unsettling, thrilling moment mixed with a mixture of wonder and a child's instinctive dread of change. I must have known more. I must have seen more of the Patrick Troughton stuff, but I don't remember any of it. I remember him choosing his face. And Tom Baker, of course, was impossible to ignore. His mad-eyed charisma, his scarf, which I'm afraid I had a scarf very much like his, not in as many colours, but certainly in length. And I used to wound it round myself on the bike, and occasionally get caught in the wheels. I'd acquired a cloak and a sort of fedora, and I biked around at great speed, and I managed to sort of hoist the cloak up, and on occasion I found I found libraries and things to snooze in, and I would curl up under a desk wrapped in my cloak. And I also had a little rabbit that I took for walks on a lead, and the rabbit would sort of hide under the cloak and then peep out. So it was a peekaboo really moment. And I think the rabbit and I got on very well. The rabbit and I. It sounds a bit like Wicked, doesn't it? And my concerns about Tom Baker, when I first came across him, when he first emerged at the end of the Spider series, which I think was one of the best John Pertwee seasons. At the end of that, I thought that he somehow evoked both Tom Jones and Cardinal Hume, a comparison I defy anyone to unsee now. He was magnificent, but my true favourite came when I was at Oxford. Peter Davison, the cricketer, doctor, the softer, more introspective Time Lord. The person who looked in the mirror and said, "That's the problem with regeneration. You never know what you're going to get." And I thought that was such a good line. His tenure was marked by a truly stellar supporting cast and a sense of vulnerability unseen in the role to that point. And now we turn to the current Doctor and the latest swirling vortex of crisis over Gatwa, and rumours are thick in the air that Disney is already backing away from Doctor Who, having seen their foray into the franchise backfire, and blaming Ncuti Gatwa. And there are whispers of frustration over low ratings, agenda-driven storytelling, and a disconnect with the audience. It was said that Disney executives who, one assumes, were once dazzled by the prospect of a Doctor Who cash cow, have quietly retreated from promotional events and, critically, have yet to confirm any long-term continuation of their deal. And at the heart of the storm is Ncuti Gatwa, who, according to reports, he's such a good actor. I don't know whether you saw him in The Importance of Being Earnest. Spectacular. And he's poised to leave the show after only 2 seasons, the second of which hasn't yet been screened. And the reasons range from poor leadership to frustration with fan backlash, to simply wanting to move on before the Doctor Who Association defines his entire career. An exit strategy has supposedly already been filmed, a regeneration scene tucked away just in case, and now the BBC is scrambling to decide what to do next. And so, like a deus ex machina, or more appropriately a Time Lord ex machina, David Tennant's name resurfaces as the odds-on favourite to return once again. And why not? Tennant remains arguably the most beloved Doctor of the modern era, a performer whose charisma and emotional depth helped Doctor Who soar to a peak that hasn't quite been matched since. Yet his alleged return, should it come to pass, is fraught with problems. I must say, while I was on the circle, somebody did a very nice picture of me as Doctor Who, which was both flattering and rather prescient. Actually, I shouldn't use the word prescient, because I'm sort of giving the impression that Russell T Davies has picked up the telephone and said, "How about it?" No, he hasn't, and no, I haven't said yes. But I think there's something of the Doctor in us all, and sometimes when I look at modern Doctor Who's, I think I don't see myself in that. There's a softer reset with Jodie Whittaker, the sort of introspection, and the preachiness. I don't see myself in that. But Tennant, he stepped in, he worked his magic, then promptly stepped aside for Gatwa. And to bring him back again so soon feels like a grand narrative twist that's gone wrong, and a distress flare fired off over Cardiff Bay. There's also the question of Tennant's own appeal in 2025. While still a fantastic performer, his public comments have rubbed audiences the wrong way, particularly in the increasingly polarised cultural discourse surrounding Doctor Who's direction. Once a near universally adored fan favourite, he has in some circles been caught up in the same ideological battle that had driven many former Who fans away, and the reality is that Doctor Who is yet again teetering on the brink. The show has survived cancellations, budget cuts, and more than one era of creative stagnation, but the current crisis feels more existential. There are those who argue that the series has alienated its core audience, replacing science fiction intrigue with clumsy messaging and losing the balance that made Doctor Who both progressive and engaging. The show has always been political, by the way. Its very inception in the 1960s was steeped in progressive ideals, but the charge today is that it's no longer delivering those ideas with the finesse that once made them palatable. On the other side are those who insist that the problem isn't politics at all, it's bad writing, lackluster villains, an over-reliance on flashy production values without a solid narrative core. And certainly, you get to the end of a Doctor Who episode today and you think, is that it? Is that it? The series has become too expensive, too unfocused, and crucially, too unwatched, and difficult to watch, actually. Difficult to get into, whereas there was something sticky about the John Pertwee, even the Tom Baker years, that made it, face glue television. I'm not even sure that Tennant is a solution to that. Tennant has that whimsical otherness that makes you think, wow, would he? Wouldn't he? Will he? Won't he? And the independence of the companions, all the way back to Joe Grant or somebody, so falling down step ladders and things, and then you see the next week that the angle is slightly different, and you can easily grab hold. If the BBC and Disney do bring back Tennant, they're essentially admitting that they have no new ideas, no fresh direction, and no confidence in the current trajectory of the show. And it is at best a holding pattern, a stalling tactic, while they figure out where to go next. And perhaps that's the real answer. Maybe Doctor Who, like it did after Survival in 1989, simply needs to rest. But I would love to see it come back invigorated with the eccentricity and the colour that defined its golden age, together with the special effects values that have dominated the modern incarnations. So I think there's still room for lots of sofa hiding, and lots more Doctor Who adventures, and I don't think it's necessarily a matter of waiting for the right moment to regenerate properly, not as a desperate last ditch of effort, but as a return to the sense of wonder and adventure that the show captured in the first place, and it captured it on a shoestring. And I'm not suggesting a shoestring is the way forward, but I am suggesting that lots of money, lots of deals, is not a substitute for thoughtful writing, thoughtful casting, and surprises. Surprises in what you see, surprises in who you see, surprises in that engagement with the audience. And to engage with the audience, you have to engage with yourself. And the wonderful thing about Doctor Who, and the thing which I found so mesmerizing as a child, is you could see this fantastic character, whoever he was, Troughton, Pertwee, Baker, Davison, and so on up the ladder of Who incarnations. You could see them thinking. And more recently, the Whitakers and the what's the other, Capaldi. You see them thinking, but then that thinking gives way to preaching, and I find that really bad. And it was also there, by the way, in David Tennant, and it wasn't there in Pertwee, and it wasn't there in Baker. And I can't say whether it was or whether it wasn't, but I don't think it was there in Troughton. The preaching was the entire program. So the children who were watching and the adults who were watching thought. It was thought provoking. You don't have to tell the audience what conclusions they should reach. If your writing is good enough, they will reach those conclusions. You don't have to have somebody voicing an inner trajectory. And Russell T Davies is good enough to know that, and I don't quite understand why he's got himself so bogged down in this preachiness. And I'd love to have a quiet chat with him. I'd love to write some Who, frankly. Or I'd love to be a Who villain, or maybe the benign extra Time Lord in the corner, the Professor. I don't know. Moments in the middle of the night, you have Who fantasies, don't you? Well, I hope that's as much as you have. And if there's one thing Doctor Who has taught us, it's that death and bad ratings are never final. The show can die periodically, and then it can come back just like a flower. It simply needs the right magic to revitalize it. And I salute Russell T Davies, and I think Russell T Davies is the person to reignite the flame. But he needs to trust that the audience will join the dots. He doesn't need to join the dots for them, and I think that's the key to good Who. So I'd love to know what you think, and I know I've gone so full circle here. I was talking the other day about the cancellation, and now I'm talking about the rumours that David Tennant is poised to reappear. And there might be another episode, another series following the Ncuti Gatwa stuff, or there might be a void. I hope there's not a void. I would love to see the void avoided, and I would love to offer whatever help I can to ensure that void is avoided. I think the world needs Who, and I need Who.